Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Hi. Hi. I'm Jesse from Presley, and today I'm really excited that so many of you decided to spend, I think, like some of the last hours of this year, at least that they're working with us. So that's pretty cool. And we're going to make the most out of it. And we're going to do that because we've got some amazing guests with us today. There's two guests from Gaming PR, and that's actually also the topic that we decided to focus on today, right? So the topic of Gaming PR, we decided to focus on it because we've been talking with so many PR professionals out of gaming the past few months, and there's so many interesting bits and pieces that came out of it that we decided, yeah, let's give those people a stage. Let's put them on the stage. Let's put them around our table. It's not really a round table, I know, but and ask them some questions and let's see what we all can learn from it. So that's why I'm happy to introduce our two guests here, and I'm guessing they can unmute themselves here. That's let me check that. Chris is here. Here we go. And Marion. Hello. Hi. So we've got Marion Muller from Perfect World with us. Here she is. Hi, Marion.
Hi, guys.
Hi. So from Perfect World, and probably a gentleman with one of the coolest names around, Chris Bond, or can I say Mr. Bond to you,
You
Chris?
can, sure. Thank you.
Oh, that's maybe like a joke that people make too much, I guess.
No, but
So yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, yeah. So it's really great to have you here, and yeah, we're gonna dive in right away to just like situate this a little bit for people. Of course, Perfect World and Iceberg Interactive are in the same industry, but they are two completely different companies, I guess. So Marion, it maybe would be good if you can give us a quick introduction around Perfect World.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, so here at Perfect World, we focus on online gaming mostly. We have our big franchises games such as Neverwinter and Star Trek Online are based on pre-existing universe. So the Dungeon and Dragon universe for Neverwinter and Star Trek for Star Trek Online, and so originally a Chinese company that has a branch in the U.S. and here. So I'm here in Amsterdam in Europe. So we're just the smallest sibling of Perfect World. And yeah, we've been here for 10 years, and yeah, cool. So far so good. We also have a couple of premium games like Remnant from the Ashes that was out this year. So yeah, pretty exciting.
And like, do you have some like public numbers on the amount of like people that play your games like on a monthly basis? Is there something public around that, just so people get an idea on the sheer amount of reach that you have?
Well, I'm not really quite sure about the exact numbers. I know that Neverwinter is twice as big as STO. I know that for sure. There, so STO is a bit more niche, but I mean, it's also STO is 10 years old, and Neverwinter is 6 years old. So that's those games are still, considering how old they are still popular enough for us to keep going and have new content every 2-3 months or so coming out.
Cool, cool, good, cool. Would you mind like putting the microphone a little bit closer to your?
Oh yeah, of course. Is that better?
That's like 100% better. Great, thank you. Great, but like I'm guessing that we're talking about like millions of users like on a monthly basis. I guess that's kind of.
Oh yeah, I mean I don't. Again, it's not my area of expertise. I don't want to say something that is false, but yeah, of course, for sure.
Cool. And Chris, what about Iceberg Interactive?
Sure. So yeah, Iceberg Interactive has also been around for 10 years. We were founded in 2009. We're predominantly an indie publisher and one that focuses a lot on PC gaming. So we're known quite well for the Endless series, Killing Floor, Starpoint Gemini. And just recently we've done titles like you have on your back wall there, The Sojourn, Still There. So yeah, a lot of people know us for our science fiction games, our strategy games, but we do a pretty diverse lineup. And this year, for example, we published our first games onto the Nintendo Switch, which included a local multiplayer game called Head Snatchers.
Cool.
So we do a quite diverse range of stuff for a relatively small company.
Cool. Yeah. It seems that you have like a lot of big titles. And like if we then zoom in a little bit more on the PR team, like I'm guessing that both of you, like both companies, have like a global footprint, Chris?
Oh yeah, I mean, our contacts are literally everywhere. Our market is worldwide. We don't, unless we are using some sort of external PR, which is very rare. We are doing all of the PR for the whole global market here in this office. So there's a team of 3 of us specifically focused on PR at Iceberg, and then we are part of the wider marketing team as well. And being a small company, we tend to be doing a lot of stuff overlapping with each other. So, I will go from both, writing press releases to also, editing videos and things like that. So, it's not just a single kind of PR job that you might get if you work in other industries. No. There is an expectation that you are going to be a bit creative and that you're going to have the passion for the subject matter itself. I think that's really, really important. I certainly don't think I could do the job I do if I didn't have that background that I have and the skill sets that I've managed to gather through my career.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. And Marion, I think if we switch a little bit to you, I think you guys have like more of a regional structure, right? So you have like a team in the US, one in Holland. Is it for the PR team as well the case?
Yeah, that's for the PR team as well. So the team in the US crafts a lot of our content, and then because Europe is so fragmented, they hand it over to us, and basically we're going to localize it and try to make the most out of what we have to craft an efficient strategy for different countries that we consider interesting for us. So yeah, it's more fragmented and a little bit more chaotic, I guess, than when you have one region with one language, but yeah, still interesting.
Yeah, I guess. So, and if you then like think about it, how important is it that, and Chris, you mentioned it already a little bit, is that you are passionate about gaming to actually do your job? Do you guys game yourself? Is that something that you kind of spend some time at? Are you conscious of that, or isn't that really? It's more about understanding the market.
Yeah, 100%, right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Just I think that is really essential. I think the big thing that maybe marks the gaming PR industry over other PR industries is just the sheer amount of competition for the same space. There's not as although online did really, really help in terms of making a more diverse set of press outlets and also other outlets, YouTube and Twitch, etc. The actual inequality in coverage is gigantic. So you'll have people like Fortnite who can get everywhere, and then if you're not in that top 10%, the challenge for an indie such as ourselves to get any space on any of the major websites or actually be streamed by any of the major streamers, that is a real challenge, and it's not one that seems to be going away. I think that inequality is kind of the trend of the whole world at the moment. So does
that frustrate you sometimes?
Absolutely it does, because there are so many wonderful projects that people are working on. We work with a huge assortment of wonderful developers, and it's a shame when it feels like you've got this great game and you can't get it to the same audience that it deserves to get to. But it is also reassuring to know that is the challenge that's facing literally, hundreds and thousands of games a year versus, those very, very rare. And even in the AAA space that luckily we don't have to go into, even in that space, it's hugely competitive. And if you are trying to do something that's original, it can be really, really difficult.
And I guess that's kind of a challenge that not just like gaming PR is like, you have the big brands who often kind of have easy access to those news outlets and get to news. Have you found kind of like fixes for this? Is it really about just making your games more original, more fun, like pitches better? Like, have you found like solutions?
Honestly, I think that the number one solution is just relationships. If you can, know who you're speaking to and understand what matters to them, what are their struggles, because it's not just on the game making side. There are struggles at the moment. There's also a lot of struggles happening in games media, especially the more traditional media. Money is tighter because advertising is less effective. Because advertising is less effective, it means that, there is actually now less room within, say, a website or a magazine to have as many staff on board. So you get a lot of freelance work instead. And that can be very challenging for that individual writer to then keep up with various titles and then also to be then assigned. They don't have as much leverage themselves to say, I'm really passionate about this particular game, I want to cover it. They're waiting to be assigned from an editor. And as someone who used to be an editor myself, I would assign people specific tasks. And so trying to get into that editor's lineup of what's important, especially like in the season we've just been through in like October, November, where it's a very busy period, trying to be in the box of we must get this done as opposed to we hope to get this done. That is, I'd say, the key challenge.
Yes, I understand. Marion, what's your take on this?
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree that, we're, this is a very passionate market. Most people that work here in this industry are very passionate about gaming, and that's the good side of things, and in the sense that, like, when you work in PR, you can sometimes struggle to pitch your products. And at least in this industry, journalists, I tend to feel like they're interested enough, at least, in what you're talking about and in what you're pitching them. So that's the nice side of things. But on the other hand, yeah, you'll absolutely have this huge saturated market that has so many games, so many information every day coming in, that it can be very overwhelming as well for journalists and for the media. And so, yeah, I kind of agree that of course you have to have that relationship data. That's what helps the most. But that is extremely time consuming and it's very long to put in place. But yeah, of course, at the end of the day, it's talking to someone and knowing them enough so that you get that opportunity.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And do you sometimes game yourself? We didn't get to that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am also a huge gamer myself, so that helps to really stay on top of things. But at the same time, I also know that, like, I have my colleague here in PR and she's not a gamer, for example, at all. So we have a really good balance in our team because she's very passionate about PR, and that is, I don't know, we have like a good thing going on in terms of, like, I know gaming and she knows PR really well, and we just kind of merge our knowledge together and try to make the best out of this.
Yeah, diverse teams always have like better success, right? Makes sense. Do you feel now with like those bigger titles that, because you're of course a little bit more scale than Iceberg Interactive, and especially like a title like Star Trek Online, do you feel it's kind of getting easier to get like those things covered because of you have that scale now, or do you still see yourself as kind of like needing to compete against the GTAs of the world and
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's easier, especially again in a market that's so saturated and so volatile as well, if that makes sense, in the sense that there's so much information coming in every day that when you have a game that's 10 years old, the challenge is actually to be like, okay, why would I cover this for the 100th time if, when I have so much more to cover? So that's actually, even if the scale is bigger, you still have to keep things excited enough for people to want to get involved,
Yeah, that makes total sense. Chris, I'm always curious, like how people like end up in PR, and then of course like end up in gaming PR, which is even like a little bit more of a segment. And I briefly looked into your LinkedIn profile, and it doesn't read to me like distant PR career that was it. How did you ended up like doing PR now for Iceberg Games?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I would say that my role now is a convergence of my two previous roles in my career. So I started out as a writer for a company called Jinx TV, who are currently an esports TV channel, but back then used to just be an all games TV channel. They were based in London. They were broadcasting all over the world. And I was writing, game reviews, game previews, features, top 5 lists, all the stuff that, you would normally see as web articles, but we were doing as these little 5-minute videos. And over the time that I was working for Jinx, I eventually was also producing TV shows. We were doing live TV shows. We were also obviously doing loads of stuff on YouTube. And we had a TV show for, if anyone's familiar with the company Sky Television, they're like the big satellite broadcaster in the United Kingdom. We were doing a show for them. So I was doing loads of the gaming journalist stuff. I was going to E3. I was, going to launch events. I was, reviewing titles, etc. But we had all the same pressure of that combined with a really slow turnaround because we need to get everything that we made localized. So we generally had about a 4-week period from something being done to it getting on TV, which meant that we needed as a, if we wanted to have a review of a game out on launch day or on the embargo, which may be even sooner, we needed to get that thing done ASAP so that we could get it rushed through. I think we could pick about 3 items a week that we could have on like rushed delivery that we could then get through faster. But typically speaking, if we wanted to be ahead of the curve, we had to be thinking ahead a lot and being very strategic about, okay, what can I get? And from the point of view of how we worked with PR was also like, we were desperate for footage. We needed video footage of everything, especially for games that weren't out yet. As much B-roll as we could get was phenomenal. It meant that we could get ahead and make content about that game in time without necessarily having to have the game itself in our hands, which is a challenge that everybody still faces.
And what were the kind of the things that you felt you were missing to really make that switch to PR?
So obviously, I think when you're working that side of it, it's good because you're getting a good experience of what the end result relationship is like. But it was after I left Jinx, I went to work for a marketing agency, and I was the head of the video department there. And then eventually I was what we called a client partner, but effectively I was the account manager for Microsoft. And through that role, I learned loads more about marketing. It was a much bigger company. I got to be embedded inside much bigger companies as well. So we worked with people like Jaguar Land Rover and Royal Mail and Waitrose and John Lewis, loads of really big companies. I got to go inside their offices and see how they worked and work quite closely with a lot of the people who were working for those companies in the marketing side as well. And so, yeah, I got to get to know a lot more about marketing functions and also sales functions. And I think where I've come to Iceberg from as a perspective is, this relationship thing is so essential to everything that you're doing as a marketing agency. And I wanted to apply the same thinking to the way that we do PR here, which is eventually what led me to Presley, because we wanted an actual digital way to organize our contact database that also let us, include notes and links and, actually really enrich those profiles so that even if I'm, on the road, I can just open my phone, I can take a look at a profile, I can catch up, I can see what my colleagues have been saying or doing with that person over the year. I think that stuff's all really important. Cool. So, I've kind of come to it from, I have no prior PR experience at all, but I've come to it from a sort of marketing and a games journalism background smooshed awkwardly together.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I think that especially in gaming PR, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Marion, if I was going to your LinkedIn profile, it was almost like I was traveling the world, because it seems that you took a little bit of a detour before you ended up in Amsterdam at this point. But what was the thing that attracted you to kind of take a role in gaming PR? What was the thing that said now, yes, this isn't a challenge I want to take?
Well, for me, I think for me, I've done a lot of comms throughout the years, and a lot of PR and a lot of event management and so on. And it was in a lot of different industries. And I did have a bit of experience in the music industry for a while. And that was really the only creative industry that I've ever joined. Mm-hmm. And so after, as you mentioned, moving a lot around, I just really wanted, again, to be in an industry that I was really passionate about, because that makes a huge difference, I think, on, your day-to-day life and how happy you are at work, and the fact that you can also give your 100% if you're really, really passionate about the topic. So yeah, that's basically why I ended up right here, right now.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I actually like give kind of a class to certain PR students as well, and then I sometimes ask them, "Would you be able to be like a PR or kind of spokesperson for like a cigarette brand, right?" Which would like probably be very hard if you're like or you choose for the money or you that. But I think that's kind of like an interesting, almost philosophical thing you need to think about, especially if you're in comms and like you're a spokesperson and you're representing that brand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also interesting, I mean, to gain experience in whatever industry you can gain. Like for me, I was in the oil industry before as well for quite a bit, which has nothing to do with what I do now, but it's just that you learn techniques that you can just apply everywhere after that. You know, a lot of PR knowledge and comms I use every day still. It doesn't really matter, but I mean, then again, when your heart is really somewhere, that's where you shine, kind of. That's valid for everything and everyone, you know what I mean? So that's what makes the difference in the end for me. But I still think that obviously, you know, every experience is good enough, obviously, to have. And also, if you are good enough to market or to, you know, do PR or comms in an industry that you don't care about, then you're going to be really, really good at something that you care about. That's actually not bad, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. So like something that we've seen like throughout the years is that like gaming publishers tend to invest quite rapidly into building like a PR function, like much faster than any other companies that are maybe like at a smaller scale. Maybe I'll start with Chris for this one, because you guys are quite small but have like a significant like PR team already. Why does the management or like people on the helm of the company see this as such a valuable thing to have?
So I think it stems from a couple of areas. So the first one would be just familiarity with the products. The products that we do are not very short term. I mean, much more short term than what Marion's doing, but you know, we're only working on, let's say, half a dozen releases a year. So in that year, you know, you're going to be working on the same project for probably about a year in itself, which means that you need to have a lot of familiarity with not only what the product is, but then also, you know, who's responded to it, who did you show it to at an event, who have you sent codes to. If you're using a PR agency, especially if you're not using one consistently, if you're only paying for them on, say, like a month basis when you've got a big marketing beat, and then you don't pay for them for again because it goes dark for a little bit, you're going to lose that consistency. And that agency is, you know, no matter how good they are, they're never going to be able to pick up with the same intimacy on the specific project. So I think that's the core reason. I think the second reason is simply that, frankly, a lot of the PR agencies in the world are quite expensive. And it's difficult to show a firm, you know, return on that investment from PR. You know, it's very difficult to say with absolute certainty that yes, that, you know, number of hours that we spent, you know, sending review codes out and getting reviews to people turned around and it made all these extra sales and that made us a profit. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. So the more, you know, basically the cheaper you can run, the better. But I think that as a result, you know, when you weigh up those two options, it's like, well, actually, you know, maybe for the same money that we were spending on agencies, we can actually be paying to have an entire team in house. And then that team is actually going to be able to build direct relationships that are, you know, our relationships, and that we can then, you know, hopefully use not only for one title as well, one project, but also further titles and further projects down the line. Okay,
makes a lot of sense. So Marion, do you see kind of the same reasons?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I think even when you do have an agency, you should have more than just a project manager, you know, in-house. You should really have a PR person kind of overseeing everything, because that is just, again, that's something, as mentioned, that, you know, you're going to create for such a long period of time, and it's going to be so time, like very, very time consuming, and it's going to take a really long time for you to build these relationships. So I definitely think that you should, that's this is where the added value really is that you can have, you know, someone in house that knows the products really well, and that can just oversees everything that way. Yeah, for sure.
something that I'm always like also wondering, because I've started my digital career as much people also because like I was playing in a clan and someone needed to make the website of the clan, and then that was me, and that basically kind of got my thing started. And I guess there's more people like me that rolled into kind of the digital through gaming and so on. But something that we've always seen around gaming are, of course, the strong communities of people that are playing specific games. How close do you guys need to work with like the community managers to make sure that like the community gets the news in time as well, right? How is that kind of synergy between the community arranged between the PR department?
It's very, very close. I mean, this is a strategy that you need to align for sure. You can't have, especially in gaming, again, you're dealing with people that are extremely passionate, and that goes for the community as well. People are very into what they're talking about. So you can't have communication for media. It doesn't make sense. You have to be really aligned in what you're telling the community and what you're telling the media and when you do it and why. It has to be consistent, and so we work very closely with them to ensure that when we sent out a press release, that's at the same time they're sharing the news when the embargo goes off with the community, and that they also work closely with our media to kind of retweet or get a partnership going on between that particular media and our community or something. So it's your community is something that's very important, because they're the core base of everything, because they're the fans basically, and you need to leverage that and make sure that they're always on top of everything. So they're very important. Yeah.
Okay, Chris, how does that work at Iceberg?
Yeah, I think, I would only build on what Marion just said, that for us, our community management team is in the same room. It is really just one team. We are the marketing team. Everything that we do is generally structured around marketing beats. So whatever the thing is that we're doing in PR, we'll typically have some version of itself happening with the community as well. We'll usually be sharing assets, etc. So the only areas where I would say that those two things diverge a little bit is, for example, when we've got, say, a review push that we might be doing for a game. A lot of that stuff is happening under embargo, and so we're not necessarily, using that same communication, like the emails we might send for that won't be echoed with something in the community. But the vast bulk of the work that we do is very hand in hand. And I think it's important that all of those parties are also talking to each other, because ultimately, the language that you're using and the communication that you're using, even just down to the actual media outlets that you might want to reach out to, so for example, certain, for us, Forex strategy is a really important genre. And so there are particular outlets out there who are real leaders in that genre. And I would say that, they would probably say themselves, they're not only the press, but they are to a degree the community, because they are as big fans of that as anybody else is. They just happen to have the podcast or the platform to talk about it. But really, they are as much a fan of the product. So with them, that's very different, for example, than say if I was to be pitching to, the Guardian newspaper. Yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily be in that same boat. So, the online communities have their own centers, and depending on what those centers look like, that really needs to change how, as a marketing team, we communicate.
Yeah, Marion, I see you nodding your head, so I'm guessing you agree there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and yeah. Again, we're just one team working on these things. Yeah. And
it's kind of like I'm thinking now, but I don't think there's much like industries where basically like your customers can be the same as like your influencers, right? And that's of course like the best thing that there is, maybe, because like it makes it easier, but it's like never completely aligned, right? Because if they're already your customer, you also want to have more customers that are not like that area, and so you need to branch out and find new people, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the difficulty there is, it's certainly a challenge that we've faced over and over, which is, you might be really embedded with a particular group of people, and that's wonderful, but how do you advertise in a way? This goes to some more traditional advertising, because traditional advertising is having a lot of issues. We've had this year several campaigns that we have not been happy with, where we've invested a lot of our money and not really seen a lot of it come back, and that's through traditional advertising, which, at the same time, how do we then bring new people into these communities if we're not using traditional advertising, or if traditional publicity is also not necessarily working? That's why we've turned to tools like Discord, which have been very successful for us to try and pull our communities together. Instead of, I think a big thing that happened recently was that we had so many fractured communities. We had so many different outlets and websites that we were using to actually cultivate fan bases. And the problem with that is, not only is it loads and loads of work to do every single one of those things and update, be it, Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and everything else, but to then try and pull those people together into one space so that they're also talking to each other and enhancing each other, that is a challenge. And that's something that we are seeing success with Discord, but, is still an ongoing problem, because, people, they hang out in different spaces online. I certainly do. So I understand that if you're wanting to try and get my attention, especially if you want to also, eventually sell me a product, yeah, I mean, even for me, someone who is natively into games, who is spending a lot of their time researching games, that's still a hard bar to pass. So it's especially hard if you're dealing with genres that are not necessarily. So for example, for us with Railroad Corporation, that was a strategy tycoon game that we did this year, and that's a game that harkens back to some, classics. And it does appeal to a slightly older audience. But that older audience, they're not in the same places that the audiences for our other games are. So how do we communicate with them that this game exists, that's something that they would be genuinely interested in? And that's why we need to be one team, because the advertising side of our business and the marketing side of our business couldn't be sitting in a different building from what we're doing in publicity or community, because all of those functions need to be working together.
And is this something, Marion, you see at Perfect World as well? How you kind of like work together with marketing?
Yeah. Oh God, absolutely. We're just hanging out all the time. We're literally sitting across from each other every day. So yeah, it's a team effort basically, and everybody's just pitches in and has different ideas. It doesn't really matter if you're doing design or community or PR or marketing. We're all working together towards the same goal, and we're all kind of gamers anyway. So we have a lot of brainstorming sessions, and it's just I think it's the most efficient way.
Absolutely.
To work. Yeah.
But you still see like a lot of kind of like in other kind of sectors, especially that like comms and marketing is pretty separate, right? Separate like challenges. So it's really interesting to see that like at least for both of you, you kind of like still have your own responsibilities, I guess, but are working together pretty heavily on getting the word out. So going a little bit deeper into kind of these newer tools like Discord and Twitch. Basically, like in that case, like if we seen like other industries, not a lot has changed platform-wise. It's been like pretty stable, like since Twitter, Facebook, and like those platforms have been settled. It has not really changed a lot the last 3 years. But for you guys, like it's been kind of racing on and on and on. So how are you how are you evaluating if it's something you need to look into? For Twitch, it's probably just a reach, I guess, or how do you make these calls on we need to be more into like streamers, or like how are these decisions made, Marion?
Well, it's just you need to be where the people are. Basically, you need to be where your players and your fan base is. That's just it. So of course, yes, we're looking. We're on Twitch, and we are looking into those platforms because this is where people hang out now. So this is also an interesting topic when you think about, influencers and streamers, now they're just becoming the media basically. So for us here at PR, we work very closely with community that basically handles influencers. but the line is just so blurry because influencers, they're part of our community, and obviously you want to get them on board and you want to build on that community. But they're obviously, as you mentioned, in the past 3 years, they're becoming more and more, just bigger and bigger in the picture, of this industry. And in terms of like, okay, I have a message that I want to send out there, to the media, that obviously includes influencers now. And so, yeah, those platforms are huge, and they're just a huge part of the strategy.
Is there still like a line between, like, if you have your contacts, this is my contact list of influencers and this is my contact list of, like, what's a traditional journalist in gaming? Like, I don't know. Like, do they exist, like traditional just journalists in gaming, or are they already like influencers, right? What's the difference?
No, I mean, well, there's still somewhat of a difference in terms of, okay, you'll have, I don't know, someone from IGN or whatever. Those, I think, could be considered traditional journalists in those terms, because they, they're obviously passionate about gaming and probably gamers themselves, a lot of them, but they write about those topics on the daily. They write, most of them you don't even know their faces, but you read a lot of their articles without even knowing it's them. You know what I mean? So they're, in that sense, I think, more traditional, and they're, writing for all those websites. And then you'll have influencer in terms of, okay, YouTube and Twitch. And
do you, yeah, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so I mean, again, there is somewhat of a difference. We kind of don't still work like as a whole here. We kind of still separate it in terms, it's not the same thing. You can't send, I don't know, press release to a YouTuber. That doesn't really match, what the tone is. So yeah, here it's much more handled by community on our side, and because it's I guess a bit chiller and a bit more relaxed, and it's all about, again, building relationship around that person's community and getting to know them and working with them. And it's so it's, again, you can see how, when I'm explaining it, how it's very PR, but again, in a very different way, and it's new and exciting at the same time.
Cool, good, Chris. Just like, it would be interesting to learn, how do you then make that initial connection with like an influencer, or like how do you make that initial step to build that relationship? Because I think we all agree that that's a crucial part, building that relationship, getting that line. But where do you start? Do you have like a strategy for that?
It's extremely difficult, right? So on the one hand, email is still a really prime function of how we communicate with people. Sending out, be it a press release, whether it, or if, just what we would call an influencer mail or an influencer blast, which will usually be a lot more focused and to the point. Because so with press releases, a challenge is that some media outlets will simply take your press release and just copy paste it verbatim on their website, and they will publish that. So you want your press release to be something that the public could read and would be interesting and would be enticing to them. If you email a YouTuber, it doesn't need to be anywhere near that fluffy, because they actually are very time poor. They don't want to sit and read a long email like that. They don't really care. What they want to know really is, do you have a key for that game, and can I just play it? Ideally, they want to watch some video of it first and understand, like, what is actually the game that I'm going to be spending my time bothering to download. And that's the core thing you need to get across to them. If you try and spend a whole A4 sheet talking about, the backstory and the world and all of this stuff, they're probably not going to read it. So it's a big waste of time. So I think that's if, for us, we also split, we deal with influencers on the PR team, but we do divide them, within Presley, we have different tags for people, depending if we consider them to be more traditional media or influencers. But, it's fair to say that there is a real gradient between different people there. You're right to say that those things are intermingling, because for me, I look at the difference of motivation. So if I am a, salary employee of a games media outlet, my motivation is probably to get as many articles up on my website today as possible. I'm looking for variety. I'm looking for good headlines. If I am a streamer, yes, I might be looking for something, new and fresh, but I'm also looking for something that I maybe can own, that I can be the go-to person for that particular title. I'm looking for something that I enjoy playing enough that if my audience wants me to, I'm happy to play it every night all week. And that's a very different thing when you think about it, having this, one shot kind of disposable but exciting news piece versus having this, long-term, very engaging, very rich experience for somebody else. So, and in between those two, of course, are all the subtleties of everybody in between. So whether it's people who do video essays now on YouTube, which is an extremely time consuming and rich thing for them to do. It takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of playtime, but all of it comes out as something that maybe is like a 15-minute video at the end of it. How do you address those sorts of people as well? Again, there is no clear-cut answer because this stuff's all really new. Yeah. So typically speaking, it's just about common sense. It's about trying to put yourselves in the shoes of someone and say, what do they want out of this relationship? So don't so much thinking about what you want. You want coverage, fine, great, good for you. But what do they want from it? Because if you can't actually appeal to what they want, then the odds are there is somebody else right next in your inbox, in your Twitter DMs, wherever you're actually approaching somebody, there'll be somebody else there waiting to take that opportunity instead. Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. Marion, you discussed relationships in your introduction, and this is like something that's also pretty near and dear to our heart, building that relationship kind of first before you start kind of expecting tons of them. Like, how do you keep that going, right? Because of course you build that relationship through content, because that's why there is a relationship in place. Do you sometimes kind of try to meet up? Do you kind of sometimes like send mails without sending a press release? What's the strategy that is in place for that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so this is very, again, for Europe, it's so fragmented that it's really sometimes challenging in terms of what language they speak, So, but I'll just speak for what I know, which is French and English, and how I build relationship with them. And it's not only press releases, obviously. If you're lucky enough to meet them at a conference or, at like an event somewhere that revolves around gaming in Europe, that's just the best approach, because obviously once you've put a face on someone's email, you're just so more likely to, have that nice relationship going over like, oh, how are you doing? And how was your holiday or something like that. So it's very not just about business at some point, it's also just keeping that relationship alive and having a genuine interest in who you're talking to. And again, in this industry, people they're very interesting and they're very passionate. So that's one thing that's easy about that, is that you can connect on a lot of different topics, and yeah, I think again that it takes a long time, and that of course when you have a successful campaign and a successful beat with that particular media outlet or journalist, it's great, but it's not enough to maintain a relationship in the long run. You have to really nourish this, and to me, it's, you don't want to just spam them with your news or your beats throughout the year without ever, having that personal touch of actually engaging a little bit. But at the same time, since they're journalists and they receive so much information in one day, you have to find that balance of, and that timing also of when and how to approach them. So again, something that always is great is when you're able to meet these people, at any event.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. And like maybe last quick question before we go into like the Q&A, because people, like, if you have questions, like before we go into it, ask them in the Q&A box and we can kind of see if we can go through them. But maybe last question before we go there. Let's say that like Chris, that you would switch jobs and go maybe work at a bank, which I don't think you would do. But what would be like the one thing that you kind of would take from like your gaming PR experience and try to apply it in a different role or in different industry?
So, well, I can sort of reverse engineer that and say that the thing that I took into this job from working for a non-gaming job something my old boss used to say was that for him, there was two different philosophies when it came to sales. It was, you could either be hunting or gardening. I'm much more of a gardener. So I think that, you invest and you take time and you will not necessarily see results right away. But if you do that and you are sincere about it and you actually genuinely care about the relationships that you're fostering, those relationships will always come back and they will always benefit you eventually. I think that, that involves, if I was to go and work for a bank, I would be thinking about that in regards to, say, my customers. How are we genuinely making their lives better? Not because, it's necessarily going to make me richer, but because it means that the actual relationship is the business. So it allows us to sustain that. It allows us to change it. I think that if you see your relationship in any sector at all as purely transactional or disposable, I do think that you're doing it wrong. I think that even, especially in a very digital culture where we don't necessarily see people face to face, where, like you were saying, we see people through an email address. I think as personal as you can be, the better. And yeah, I completely agree as well that, meeting people face to face is the number one way to create and maintain a relationship. It completely transforms your relationship when you get home and you start emailing that person again. And I think, any sector I would go into, I would take that lesson.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. So and for you, Marion, what would that be?
If I were to work at a bank?
Yeah, well, not a bank or like a different industry than gaming. What would be one of the things that you've learned now that you would kind of love to take with you?
Well, actually, what I really realized now is that, because for me it's the reverse journey. I've been in a lot of industries that I was not at all passionate about, and I was not unhappy or anything, but I was not thriving. And so the lesson that I take away from this is actually find that thing that makes you really passionate in life, because then when you get up in the morning, it won't be so terrible. So I'll try my very best to not go work at a bank, I guess, with that logic in mind.
But we all use banks, so banks are necessary as well, right?
No, of course.
All right, cool, great. All right, let's take a look at the questions that came in from the attendees. So we've got an interesting question from Pavel. Is it only press releases that you try to pitch to media outlets, or is there a more complex content strategy involved? How do you approach content creation on the whole, be it for PR or for promoting your game? Maybe let's start with Chris, because that's kind of right in your ball game, if I'm correct.
It's a multi-pronged question. So first and foremost, email is still the lifeblood of what you're doing, because it is the thing that unites pretty much all of our contacts. That being said, I know for a fact that many of my contacts are not reading their emails. That means that following up with them is extremely important. And I think that also following up with people in a diverse way really makes a difference as well. So if someone isn't replying to your email and they haven't replied to your follow-up email, maybe try and DM them on Twitter if you're following each other on Twitter. Discord I found to be really useful in this regard, because not only am I able to chase somebody in a more informal, IM way, but typically that has spawned then longer conversations where we've got to talk about other topics than the topic I got in touch about. And we've ended up getting a lot more back from each other from that. And I think that, that comes down to the fact that certainly in this industry, I think most people they very sincerely are happy to talk to you. They just don't have time. So you have to be very patient with people and not necessarily expect this immediate thing to come back to you. And you just got to be very forgiving and say, look, I know that you've ignored 5 of my emails, but I'm going to assume that the reason for that is the same reason I sometimes ignore my emails, which is that you're really busy. And that is not your fault. That's just the way it is. So yeah, I think, you know, press releases, it's a good thing to start with because it gives you a really good idea of what the interest is in what you've sent out. And if we have a press release and we get a really good, you know, amount of replies back, or just a really good open rate, or we see really good coverage coming out the back of it, that is very encouraging for us to say, okay, you know, we got the, you know, we got the actual targeting of this right. We sent this to the right people because they were actually interested in what we had to say. And the actual news itself, we did this at the right time because there was something of value here for people. So I still believe in press releases very, very highly, but I think you need to be prepared. And also don't forget that, you know, the people who are closest to you, especially with you know, press and influencers, they probably also follow your social media. So if you announce a new game and you put the trailer up on your Twitter and you put the trailer up on your YouTube, odds are you don't actually need to send a press release for those people to have seen that piece of information, because they care enough about you. So in a sense as well, you have to kind of be careful with your strategy about, you know, when is it time for a press release? Personally, I think that, you know, something that we've looked at this year is that we've probably been sending too many press releases. I think that we've been, because we're, you know, we're like, okay, we need something for this. But, you know, the reality is that actually not every piece of information needs to be delivered in that format. It's simply a good format for a lot of the traditional media that we're used to working with. So I would never not use it, but I would say that you should always be thinking in your strategy about how you're going to supplement it, how you're going to, you know, do things at the same time, how you're going to, you know, vary your responses to that. But yeah, I think that's still really important. And then as far as content creation, well, sure, you know, again, you need to be thinking about those different things. So, you know, with an email, for example, you know, a lot of the time for a lot of people's inboxes, they won't necessarily see any rich media when they receive an email. They'll just get a lot of empty boxes. So you could put a really fantastic image in your email. We do that, but with the awareness that for a lot of people, unless they are genuinely, you know, enticed by it, they're probably not even going to see that image. They're not going to actually watch your video that you've bothered to make and embed for them. So I think people also need to be careful about how much resource and time they put into those things, because, you know, yeah, it's wonderful to have an amazing trailer. You know, we work with some fantastic editors. They make us brilliant trailers, but no matter how brilliant the trailer is, it doesn't necessarily get that trailer a lot of views, or, you know, get it put into a lot of places. And I myself have sat and spent a very long time this year making things that then have not necessarily performed as much as we wanted them to. And, you know, I think it's easy to underestimate how much people just want to see gameplay in the video games industry. They just want to see gameplay. You don't have to edit it. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't need to do any cutscenes. Just do 5 minutes of raw gameplay and people will be actually very satisfied with that. So I think don't overthink it too much either. You know, just
something very practical that came on when you mentioned Discord. Like, people are asking, like, do you have your own Discord for PR, or do you use your personal one? Like how does that work? Just something like very practical.
I use my personal Discord account, although it is predominantly a work account. It is, you know, it's owned by me. If I left the company, it would be mine still, but it is, I don't really use it for anything but my job. Iceberg itself has our own Discord channel, so people can come and join that and they can speak to us there, which is a really, really great way of talking to us.
Absolutely.
So it varies. But yeah, as far as my actual profile, that profile is just my profile.
It's probably like most kind of authentic as well, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with Twitter. You know, the Twitter
same.
is just my Twitter. I don't have a separate Twitter for work. Like, that would be crazy. You know, most people, if you follow me on Twitter, will know it's mostly game stuff that I will post. It's usually just retweeting other people. But yeah, like, again, like, that's just, to me, that's just a very natural way of.
So I'm not going to see selfies from you at the Star Wars premiere tonight, no?
No, not usually. Sometimes you might see a picture of my cat every now and then, but
of course,
a lot of the time it's because, you know, I like sharing things that I like. So whether it's, you know, and it might not necessarily be work things, but, you know, I follow other developers on Twitter. I'll share their work, you know, stuff like that. So it is a community thing.
Yeah, cool. All right, Marion, next question for you. And a couple of people have asked this, like about working with specialized media like ING, Kotaku, and so on, pointing out that it is easier to get coverage here. What about when you're working with mass media? How do you spark interest among non-gaming journalists? Have you kind of like specific strategy for that in place?
Yeah, that really depends again on the territory and on the game that you're marketing. So I would say, when I first got here, that one of the things that I really had to dig in was how fragmented Europe is and how each territory has different needs. Like what works in Germany will probably won't work in France. What works in the UK is very different of, what works in Russia or whatever. So this you really need, first of all, I would say, to have a really good media landscape in place and kind of just, know, okay, Germany, they don't like interviews, or France, they don't like giveaways unless it's our hardware or whatever. So you really need to have like those facts straight away, I think, in order to craft your strategy. And then, yeah, I mean, it depends on the game, because when you're going to just target mass media, you'll have opportunities to do that. And depending on the game, you'll have them more often than not. So I'm thinking about a game like Star Trek Online. Sometimes it happens that we do have interviews opportunities with, a very, like, with talent, voice actors that actually were in Star Trek series, like Jerry Ryan. Or so if we do get those opportunities, which happened in the past, then yeah, sure, that's easier to target mass media, but again, depends on which territory.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you really need all this information breakdown before actually going in. And then obviously some things are, out of your control, in the sense that, like, when a game does incredibly well, which is kind of like what happened with Remnant for us this summer. Like, this was kind of the big surprise of the year, that this game did very, very well, and it was just, picked up by a lot more mainstream media than our other games. And so that is just when magic happens. Basically, you just, when your product is doing well on its own, then great. you can just pitch it in a much easier manner. But yeah, so I would do that. This is how we do things here. Just do a lot of background research and just know when to pitch it at the right time for the right title. And sometimes it can really work out.
Okay, good. Makes a lot of sense. Like we've talked about this already a little bit, but there's a question, and this is the last one, and I'll have, before we kind of wrap up, and so I'll have Chris answer that one. Do you have like an influencer marketing strategy, like meaning work with gamers to relay your brand messages and product in place?
So we typically try to avoid, for example, paid activations with influencers. It's not that we don't do it, but it's that, once you fall down that rabbit hole, you can just find yourself having to pay for everything. And we do believe that, our games are good enough that, people should want to play them because they are entertaining and because people should want to watch you play the game. However, yes, it's important, especially depending on the kind of game that you're working with, that to have a really strong strategy in place for, specifically who you want to partner up with, at what point in your game's timeline do you want to partner up? And that's always a big open question, because oftentimes budgets will not allow you to do this more than once or twice, in the entire game's lifespan. So you've got to say to yourself, all right, do I want to do this when the game is first revealed, maybe during like an alpha phase, where the game is also maybe a bit rough around the edges, and then these videos that get made are going to dominate what people think of the game, but the game isn't ready? Or do I want to wait until the game is ready, but at that point, we haven't necessarily built enough hype, we haven't got people to see the game early enough, and that is always an open question. And a big difference for that is going to be genre as well. So for a game like Still There, narrative games tend to work very well on Twitch. People like watching them, but then when they work well on Twitch, they don't sell well. There's been a whole bunch of cases this year of games that have not done very well commercially, but did really, really well on Twitch. And it just seems to be this recurring thread that, it's like they were wonderful games, everyone loved them, but if you've watched them on Twitch, you don't feel like you have a need to then go away and buy them. So you have to be very careful, It's like for Still There, we didn't do an awful lot with streamers with that game because we knew that we wanted people to actually go away and, experience the story for themselves because it's a wonderful story. But, if you've already watched someone else play it, it's probably not worth that much to you. So, I think it's a complete contrast depending on what kind of genre you're working with. And because we do work with a lot of different genres, it means that every single, project has to be taken from, the bare bones, and we have to look at it and say, okay, is this something that we think is going to work well with press? Is this something that's going to work well with streamers? Is this something that's going to work well at an event? And then try and allocate our budget to, meet that strategy.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah, I've got a feeling we can go on for hours, like talking about gaming PR. So right. But unfortunately, I think it's time that we wrap up because, what time is the premiere, Chris? Do you need to...
For context, I'm going to see Star Wars tonight, so no spoilers.
Yeah.
It is in about an hour and a half.
So I don't want to bring you in any danger of not making that. So it's time to wrap up. So, but I think it's been so cool. I've had another 20 questions we couldn't get through, but that's been because it's so interesting. So I want to thank you so much, Chris and Marion. It's been very interesting. And we, of course, got a gift for you that we're going to send your way. There's a choice you need to make. One, we can send you some Belgian beers, or we can send you some bubbles. So, and that choice is yours. Chris, what do you decide?
For myself, I would go with beers, but I think the office would probably prefer bubbles. So
what are you gonna go with bubbles? Yeah. Okay, Marion, beer or bubbles?
Yeah, I think I'll have to go with bubbles as well.
All right, no, that's great. We'll send that your way. It was super to have you here on the call. For the people who are joining, it would be great to get your feedback as well. Feel free to just leave it in the chat. Or just send it to me to jesse@presley.com. We plan to do this soon about another topic as well, in a month or two or so. So if you have ideas for topics we should consider, let us know on jesse@presley.com or on our Twitter and LinkedIn. Chris and Marion, where can people find you if they want to follow you? Can they follow you on Twitter, for example? What's your idea?
Yeah. So Twitter is probably the best place with me. I'm at HippoShaped.
Okay, we'll add the link in the follow-up email. So, and Marion, where can people follow you?
Well, I mean, you can always message me on Instagram. I'll follow. I'll like you the at and with pleasure.
Okay, cool. So thanks so much for joining. I wish everyone a great year end. I hope you have some holidays planned the next couple of weeks. But thanks so much, and we'll send the recording somewhere in the new year. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye,
so
guys.
much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.